Hi, can you hear me? Okay. So welcome to this afternoon session. I think it's fundamentally the most important conversation for this region, perhaps for many regions today. How do we build for peace and cooperation, for prosperity and stability? And South Caucasus, as we heard this morning in the inaugural address from the Prime Minister, from President Macron, from the Foreign Minister's speech, South Caucasus is at a turning point, and the fundamental experiment happening here is how do we connect for cooperation, connect for peace, connect for prosperity, and connect for mutual benefit. The world is watching. I'm certainly a very interested individual. 3 years ago, we invested into building the Yerevan dialogue because we truly believed that conversations and dialogues can lead to progressive outcomes. And through this particular panel discussion this afternoon, I really want to ask each one of you to take 3 to 4 minutes to reflect on the fundamental question placed before us, that how can connectivity build trust? How can connectivity build good economics? How can connectivity build sustainable peace? And can we seize this moment in a world which is otherwise facing multiple storms? Can South Caucasus, through a unified approach, through a regional cooperative framework, ride the storms? I think that's the title of the conference, and that's my imploration to this panel to focus on, can we capture the zeitgeist of this moment of creating something for the future? Let me start with our first speaker, Ruben Rubinian, Vice President, National Assembly of Armenia. Sir, you have 3 to 4 minutes for your opening thoughts.
Thank you. The good news is that we are already seizing the moment when it comes to the situation in the South Caucasus, and particularly the state of the relations between Armenia and Azerbaijan. The other good news is there is a state of relations between Armenia and Azerbaijan because before last August there was a state of conflict between these countries. And many things have happened since, unimaginable things, things that people wouldn't believe that are possible. More than 2 years have passed already that no single soldier or a service person has been killed from either side on the Armenian-Azerbaijani border. Ever since the conflict started, there has never been such 2 years. There's even, at least in the case of Armenia, and the statistics of which I know, there has never been a single year where no service person has been killed on the border from fire from the other side. Furthermore, starting from last fall, Azerbaijan lifted all restrictions on railroad transit to and from Armenia, which is an enormous step for the region of the South Caucasus because trains did not run through Azerbaijan to Armenia for almost 3 decades. And it's a fundamental stone in the wall of peace and interdependence in a good way between our countries. We have also started direct trade with Azerbaijan. Armenian business people have already imported oil products from Azerbaijan, again, something that was not imaginable before, and there are discussions regarding reciprocal business endeavors. I mean, Armenian business people importing goods that Azerbaijani business people would need. But we have an opportunity to make this positive situation even bigger. We have the normalization process between Armenia and Turkey, which we have started back in the beginning of 2022 with Ambassador Kılıç, with Serdar. And we think that it's time that positive big steps also start happening in the Armenia-Turkey normalization process. And not to say that things haven't happened, things have happened. The flights between Istanbul and Yerevan have resumed back in 2022. Starting from this year, Turkish Airlines have started flying to Yerevan. There are discussions on having more flights between our countries. We have enabled direct air cargo trade between our countries. Yesterday we signed a protocol on joint renovation or restoration of the historic Ani Bridge, also known as Silk Road Bridge. But I have to admit that the Armenia-Azerbaijan track is ahead of the Armenia-Turkey normalization process, which is good, but I think we have a historic opportunity to also achieve
Wonderful.
Better progress in the Armenia-Turkey normalization track, and we have to seize this opportunity.
Thank you, Excellency. I think you have emphasized on more ambition on the Turkey-Armenia track. Let me turn to Ambassador Serdar Kılıç, Special Representative of Turkey-Armenia normalization process. Ambassador, over to you.
Thank you, Samir. At a given point, I thought that you overestimate our abilities, that we are going to be able to answer those questions, very crucial and very important questions in 3-4 minutes. But I'm thankful to Ruben. He almost told whatever I was planning in my mind to share with you, the railroad connections and everything. But it's wonderful to be here. First of all, I would like to thank to the Armenian government and Armenian authorities for the excellent hospitality they have accorded us. I was chatting with a number of journalists downstairs. They asked me how I feel in Yerevan. I said at home. And it is not lip service. I really feel at home here. My friends also have the same feeling. We are in a very friendly atmosphere. And throughout the normalization process, we enjoyed that friendship and understanding and openness from the Armenian side, especially Ruben. He kept on coming with constructive proposals. Although I have some complaints about his insistence on some of the proposals in that regard, but I mean, we have covered a lot of ground. I mean, we started, as he mentioned, back in January 22, and if we return back to that point and tell Ruben and Serdar that you are going to be at this point in 2026, most probably we wouldn't believe it. I mean, we have covered enormous ground, as I have mentioned. First of all, I mean, the normalization definition is wrong. I mean, we are not normalizing Turkey-Armenia relations. It's not a normalization process. It's a confidence-building process. So we are trying to build confidence so that we'll be able to take overarching steps that will take us to the full normalization of relations between our two countries. But you cannot isolate the Turkish-Armenian normalization or confidence building process from the overall efforts in the region on connectivity. And we shouldn't only confine connectivity to transport, railroad, and so on and so forth. There are more important fields that we have to exert efforts. I mean, internet connections is very important. Transportation, air transportation is very important. Internet connections, as I told you, we have recently signed an agreement with the Armenian companies in that regard in order to provide better internet services to the Armenian people. As I told you, I mean, we have to have a broader approach to the connectivity issue, and we have to have a broader approach to the establishment of peace and stability in the region. I mean, I have my own ideas, of course, as to who is going to make the proposals in that regard, whether the third countries should come up with their creative ideas as well. But overall, I feel that any idea for enhancing relations, developing relations, and establishing long-term durable peace and stability in the region, the ideas should come from the region, within the region itself. We should display the sense of ownership in that regard. So this is what I will tell for the time being.
I think that's the last point you make is important. The region has to own it. But I'm going to come back to you in the next round and ask you, what is the role of outside powers, big powers? Everyone is wanting to influence outcomes, and I'm going to ask you about that. How do you manage regional cooperation with external interests that are bound to grow once connectivity grows, right? But let me first turn to Magdalena Grono, EU Special Representative for the South Caucasus and the crisis in Georgia. Magdalena, your opening thoughts.
Thank you so much, Samir. Thank you, colleagues.
Can you speak closer to the mic?
Yes, I will try to do that. Good afternoon. A great pleasure to be here. And I must start by saying it's a day also where we just held the first EU-Armenia summit, so also an important day in that context. It's a pleasure to be on this panel. You speak about regional ownership, and of course I am surrounded by colleagues whose participation precisely highlights that the region works together in a novel way. And I think that needs to be really welcome and highlighted. I feel that the new unprecedented dynamic since the Washington summit of last summer really opens new strategic opportunities for the region and its overall positioning. Its positioning as an absolutely crucial chess piece on the route between Europe, obviously the Black Sea, South Caucasus, onto Central Asia and Asia, but also with new opportunities opening for perhaps greater cooperation with the Middle East. And indeed, this is even more highlighted as an important island, in a sense, right now of stability, as we see two big conflict theaters to the northwest of the region, but now also to the south of the region. So this is a moment in time to really focus on cementing that stability, and I believe that connectivity and the broader connectivity agenda can indeed cement peace and its benefits. Now, for the EU, connectivity, of course, is a crucially important focus. And indeed, for us, there is importance in the security of links and supply chains and transit, but security is not the only thing. We in the EU really put a premium on trusted partnerships, and we feel that in this increasingly uncertain global world, precisely trusted partnerships are what can make connectivity work and work long term. And these trusted partnerships also need to work both ways. They are two-way streets, and they obviously need to develop prosperity for all those along those routes. And for us, therefore, and I appreciated that in the framing of this panel, the focus also on creating value chains along the way is an important one. We believe that value chains, both at the macro level, and here, for instance, a good example is work with Central Asian partners on critical raw materials, but also at micro levels, as we talk about multimodal connectivity that will create business opportunities and opportunities for really populations to benefit as the links are being deepened and built. These are precisely the building blocks of making that connectivity both benefit all, but ideally indeed cement peace in the long run. A lot of discussion, of course, about the middle corridor at this moment. In our calculations, the volumes along the middle corridor have increased fourfold since 2022. And we hope that with the right investments, they can increase another threefold by 2030. And these are precisely also investments that we are discussing with the South Caucasus partners. One additional moment I'd like to highlight is that for us that connectivity needs to be inclusive and not isolate any partners in the region, as previously conflict realities had perhaps dictated. So we are now discussing, for instance, here with colleagues in Yerevan, connectivity projects that would look at perhaps road infrastructure, border crossings, etc. With colleagues in Baku, given the new opportunities that have opened, and including through the TRIP project, broader kind of line that opens up the linkages. We're discussing rehabilitation of the Nakhchivan railway segment. I can talk to this perhaps more in the discussion if there's interest. One last thing I wanted to say, and I know that in the audience there's a lot of colleagues from the peace-building community. I think that connectivity is also something that can perhaps create a beneficial environment for also working with the legacies of the past that obviously conflicts always leave behind. I think that economic benefits alone are perhaps not sufficient to address all aspects of the past, but they certainly create a conducive atmosphere, and this is something also that we on the EU side would like to support.
In fact, Ambassador, I'm going to turn to you, Magdalena, I'm going to turn to you in the next round and ask you that Europe has both experiences. You've seen a hyper-connected Europe go to war multiple times in the last century. You've seen a connected Europe create a union. And I'm going to ask you what kind of connectivity works and what could be problematic. So I'm going to come to you from a European lens. But let me now turn to Lasha Darsalia, Deputy Minister of Foreign Affairs, Georgia, for your opening remarks, sir.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Saran. First of all, I want to express our appreciation to be here, and I'm glad that I'm back in Yerevan Dialogue for this discussion with the distinguished panelists, and I'm glad that we have this opportunity to talk about South Caucasus. When we are talking about South Caucasus and connectivity, I really want first to talk about South Caucasus. And Armenia, Azerbaijan, Georgia, we are independent countries more than 3 decades now, even 4th decade is on. And this region went through a lot of tragedies, conflicts, refugees, IDPs, economical chaos, and in the end we still are so on a path of development. But when we are talking about South Caucasus, it is important to say that first time now we have the chance. South Caucasus before was just geographical concept. And first time in our history, in modern history, first time we have the chance to become the real politically, economically region. And this is very important for Georgia. This is not granted. We are not even there yet. We are on this path. And for Georgia, regional cooperation is very important. For Georgia, South Caucasus as a whole region is very important. I even can say that we were waiting for this momentum last 35 years to have this chance talk about the regional cooperation as a whole region, not bilaterally, not separately. Georgia was enjoying very good relations with all our southern neighbors, including Turkey. But this is first time when we have chance to talk about region, which I think will be important basement for connectivity in the end in future, because the bilateral relations is not really enough to be attractive for the outside world. While if we will have proper regional cooperation, that's exactly what will make South Caucasus as important hub, attractive hub for outside world to invest, to be part of these processes inside of our region. So in this regard, I just want to say that we are very much motivated. We have a lot of incentives and very much interested to further advance the regional cooperation. You know that Georgia also invested a lot in this, and we are looking forward South Caucasus as an attractive hub, important hub for international trade, international investments, and economical activities. Thank you.
Thank you, Lasha. I'm going to come back to you in the next round, and I'm going to ask you again the question around external actors, their roles in the region, and how are we going to create a regional cooperation in this whole new multipolar architecture that is emerging. It's confusing. It's different to the 20th century when we had a very definite pin code address for the institutions that would serve us, the United Nations. As it becomes less relevant in certain aspects, how does the region, or who does the region turn to? I think that's a question I want to ask you. But let me go to Rusif, a colleague of mine who heads, he's the director of the Topchu Bashov Center in Azerbaijan. You've already been invoked a couple of times in this conversation. In many ways, you are one of the key protagonists in this region as we build out to the future. Your opening remarks, please.
Oh, thank you, Dr. Saran. I can't start my speech without saying a couple of words of appreciation to our hosts for inviting me and my colleagues from Azerbaijan. I know that Armenia's Foreign Ministry and ORF India are our formal hosts. However, when it comes to the visit of an Azerbaijani delegation, many agencies are usually involved. So I really want to expand my gratitude to everyone involved to make this visit possible. However, seeing an Azerbaijani expert in Armenia nowadays is not unusual, thank God, and these kind of expert engagement and reciprocal visits are really contributing to the societal reconciliation. About your question, Dr. Saran, I will repeat what Mr. Rubinyan said in the beginning of his conversation. Last year, especially in fall, we witnessed 2 milestone events. It was about Azerbaijan's lifting de facto embargo on Armenia-bound cargo from third countries, and Azerbaijan's shipment of certain petroleum products into Armenia. When I read this news, the immediate questions which popped up in my head were following. What was the legal basis for this economic engagement? And did Armenia pay transit fees for Azerbaijan? Now, thinking about these questions retrospectively, I realized that they were about legal framework and institutionalization of these rising engagement between the two countries, which used to be very, very antagonistic until a few years ago. So right now we are witnessing certain trade and economic interaction between Armenia and Azerbaijan, despite the absence of the peace treaty. However, the farther we go, and I know that the officials from both sides, they are exchanging the list of possible items for the further trade. The farther we go about this, the more the parties will need certain legal frameworks and you know, diplomatic settings, etc. And in this case, the question whether peace will bring trade and connectivity or vice versa is kind of a chicken versus egg dilemma for me. But what I am witnessing nowadays is that these two things are happening simultaneously and pushing each other further. Thank you.
Good. Rusuf, you actually raise an important point, something that's also agitated me. How do you institutionalize this momentum? You're talking about legal frameworks. I think what you're really asking is that how do we institutionalize all the benefits we have achieved, capture them in some framework, and then build on top. And I'm going to come back to you in the next round, and I'm going to ask you specifically, what could be some of those institutionalization arrangements that could take this momentum forward? I think that's something that I want to know. Okay, as we move to the second round, I think there are two big questions in my mind that I want to place before you. The first is, as we saw this morning and as we saw last year, international interest in a region can be very beneficial. External actors can catalyze positive change. We saw this morning the role of Europe. We have seen the role of the US. We have seen other actors play positive roles in shaping agendas. But I really want this panel to engage on this particular moment and how can the international community support it? What is the role for the outside world? And how do we allow regional ownership to sustain even as we build partnerships with external actors? And I think sometimes it's a fine balancing act. That's the first question. The second question that I want to leave with you, second part, that connectivity is an abstract term. It has to, for a common man on the street, it should have an economic return, it should have a political value. How do countries galvanize public opinion in support of many of these very large international arrangements, which are largely dots on the line, or dots on a map, lines on the map? How do we excite people to support some of these very large geopolitical ventures when they are more bothered about their existential demands of daily lives, right? And on this round, I want you to address these two big questions. How do you manage the internal domestic politics, and how do you manage the external, their interest as well as their usefulness in stitching this together? Let me turn to you, the Vice President. Let me request you to speak.
Well, speaking about external actors or states that are not directly from the region, well, I can bring you an example from this panel. For example, here we are, my Azerbaijani colleague, my Georgian colleague, my Turkish colleague. Turkey is indeed a neighbor of the South Caucasus, but it's not in the South Caucasus per se, and the European Union, of course, which is not in the South Caucasus yet. But how can, for example, Turkey and the European Union play a positive role in the South Caucasus? well, first of all, being connected to the South Caucasus. Of course, there are existing railroads and roads and infrastructure which are linking Turkey to Georgia and to Azerbaijan, but there is a vital link missing. Armenia has no direct railroad connection to the European Union because, unfortunately, so far we haven't had the opportunity to have an unblocked railroad connection between Armenia and Turkey, and hence with the European Union. But if this did happen, it would create enormous opportunities for Armenia, for Turkey, for Azerbaijan, for Georgia, for the European Union. By the way, answering to the last question, I forgot to mention that Azerbaijan lifting restrictions on transit to Armenia wouldn't be, of course, possible without the participation of Georgia, because the goods that came from Kazakhstan and Russia to Armenia passed through Azerbaijan, but then through Georgia as well, and we are very grateful to our Georgian friends for that. Of course, external actors, they can be helpful and not so much, and the world is full of both examples. Unfortunately, recently, the second example happens more often. But I think the very fact that here right now in Yerevan, an Armenian, a Georgian, an Azerbaijani, a Turk, and a European, or rather a representative of the European Union are gathered means that we are onto something, that we are thinking and discussing things in the right direction. And I am absolutely convinced that both the European Union and Turkey have a very positive role to play in the South Caucasus in the coming years or months or weeks or maybe days.
And Excellency, since you are part of the National Assembly, you represent the people, how do you excite your own people to sign on, for these big projects that now we are thinking about, which are going to take decades to implement in some sense, right? How do you excite people on the streets to sign on to this?
Well, as Serdar said, processes involve confidence building. Even if you are talking about big, grandiose ideas and projects, you have to also implement some steps which are easier to implement. For example, it may have sounded unrealistic, but it only took us a couple of months. By saying us, I mean Azerbaijan, Armenia, and Georgia, for example. It took us only a couple of months to make it happen. Some good being transported to Armenia via Azerbaijan, or to make it happen, Azerbaijan selling oil products to Armenia. So on the one hand, for example, the population of Armenia, they hear about these grand projects of, for example, TRIP, of renovating the railroads, etc., etc., which may be hard to believe if they are thinking from the standpoint of 30 years of conflict. But on the other hand, they see that in a matter of months, before their own eyes, they see a train coming from Azerbaijan, passing through Georgia, and entering Armenia, bringing Kazakh wheat. So it is with these low-hanging fruits, if you may, it is possible to show the people the real benefits of these projects, and I think we need to see more of these.
Okay, thank you. Let me turn to you, Ambassador.
Sabir, thank you very much. Well, times have changed a lot, but my 40 years of experience in diplomatic service and my in-depth knowledge of the region makes me feel half-hearted with regard to foreign intervention in the region itself. I pay the utmost importance to regional experience and regional expertise. And on the other hand, again, given the historical examples in that regard, we shouldn't let any third party or anyone for that matter to victimize the strategic interest, long-term strategic interest of the region to their short-term tactical gains. Well, with the TRIP project, we see that there was a very constructive approach on the part of the United States and their contribution to the 8th of August agreements between Azerbaijan and Armenia. They are very important. But I can give you other examples I mean, didn't contribute to that extent to the understanding in the region. So as I told you, I pay utmost importance to regional experience and expertise. As the regional countries, they know their problems and they know the solutions to their problems. And when they need assistance in that regard, of course they can seek the assistance of external powers. I mean, there are certain economic requirements that the regional countries cannot come up with. In that sense, they will of course need assistance of outside powers. I mean, when we started with this normalization process, I think Ruben will agree with me. I mean, maybe I made 30, 40, 50 proposals to Ruben to follow. And none of them aimed at making any contribution or any benefit to Turkey. My main aim was contributing to the livelihood and better future of the Armenian people. Because I live with the Armenian people in Los Angeles during my office over there and Beirut. And with Ruben, since 4 years now almost, I have the experience of working. And we have a working understanding because we came from the same culture, accept it or not. As I told, when I said, I feel at home in Yerevan, this is not lip service. I really feel at home over here. The people, they look like us, they think like us. The food even in the restaurants that you go are similar. So any solution to the regional problems should come within the region itself. And when the countries in the region feel that they need foreign support in that regard, of course they will seek for that. With regard to how we are going to generate the public support, it's all economics. If the people feel that connectivity and the projects within the context of connectivity will contribute to their livelihood, to their income, for a better future to themselves and to their families, of course they will support that. But there should be a balance over there. They should not overpay. It should not be a burden on their shoulders, the connectivity. But in the long run, of course, it's going to contribute to the understanding, economics, and everything of the region.
No, very, very important points. Ambassador, but I couldn't help but remember my first visit to Armenia 4 years ago. When I came here, I said they eat like us, they look like us, they even marry like us. But then I realized it was an Indian wedding that was happening. There was a destination wedding happening in this hotel. I thought even the marriage ceremony is like India's, but it was actually an Indian wedding happening here. But you know, on your point, I think it's important to allow the benefits of the region define the framework for the future. Magdalena, I have asked you a couple of questions.
Yes, thank you, Samir. I have 3 quick points. So the first one you
have to bring the mic close to you.
Yes, sorry. 3 quick points. The first, you asked about kind of legacies that Europe has that perhaps can be helpful or not. So of course, one can't not think back to the somehow spiritual predecessor of the European Union, the European Coal and Steel Community, that effectively after the 5 years after the war, pooled in a sense the productions of coal and steel, and through that created profound solidarities between 6 founding members. Now I think that Robert Schuman, who was of course essential in creating that concept, precisely talked about solidarities that make it both unthinkable but equally materially impossible to imagine another war. And this is something that I think we also, from our perspective, perceive precisely in the connectivity projects. Of course, they are beneficial for all of us, but if you have a sufficient interest created through investment and through then the economic benefits that this ultimately develops, it becomes indeed unthinkable and materially impossible to revert to conflict. Now, my second point is about the kind of interaction between local ownership and regional, perhaps, partners. I would like to say that the Armenia-Azerbaijan peace process has really been an incredibly powerful process where, yes, perhaps there has been important help by external actors along the way, but ultimately I feel that the ownership by the 2 capitals has been absolutely crucial And it's something that is really to be, in many ways, admired in terms of the leadership that they both have taken. And in this, we really would like to simply be a partner in the sense that the agenda is clearly set by the regional actors, and we support where this is helpful and where this is needed. We have discussed with both opportunities for that cooperation, be it indeed in developing new regional cooperation opportunities, in developing perhaps cross-border cooperation when that moment is right, in developing, economic benefits of peace. But not only, I think it's also important to come back to those deeper legacies, and there we, for instance, are a partner in addressing some of the humanitarian questions. But I would really like to agree with Serdar Bey that the kind of local or regional ownership and drive has been essential, and there the EU wants to be really helpful. Now, last point I wanted to make, you asked a little bit about how to motivate people. I have the impression that there are indeed many things that have been opened by indeed the trade cooperation that has started, by this discussion on connectivity, etc. So what this can do is to, of course, boost trade, start creating jobs, start reinforcing resilience, etc., including at very local levels, and in particular in a cross-border context. And this is, I think, powerfully important. And this leads me to the last point, is that because of the decades of division, I find that while all of you here know that you eat the same, marry the same, and in many ways have similar customs, music, etc., many people in the societies are yet to, if not learn it, to certainly internalize it. And this is the kind of knowledge of each other that can also come through these connections, and that I think will be
Thank you.
crucial.
That's an important point. I'm going to turn back to that as my final question to the entire panel. I'm going to come to that. It's slight variation of that. But let me turn to Minister Darsalia. Minister.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And well, first of all, when talking about external actors, I want to say that not all the external actors are interested that we have prosperity and development in this region. And I think you know which actor I mean. So I will not go deep into that, but that's exactly where region needs help as well. And but this to discuss this maybe needs the separate panel, and I will stop here. But talking about those actors who are really interested that we have development in this region, I think when talking about United States, European Union, other actors, we can, there is a lot of things where region really needs support and help, and where we can have this. And first of all, I would say that what is important is that really understand the region, to listen to the region, to understand where these countries really need help, and help where they are asking to be helped, not just generally saying that we know where you need to be helped. And I think this is important, to understand the region, to listen to the region, and help where they are really asking help. And there are, I think, a lot which external actors can offer and increase the incentives for further cooperation.
Thank you. Rusef.
Dr. Saran, when it comes about the involvement of third parties or external powers in our region, well, we in Azerbaijan, we were pretty much traumatized for decades about the engagement of the infamous OSCE Minsk group. And according to the widespread Azerbaijani perception, that entity simply procrastinated this whole situation without offering any real solutions. Therefore, in the post-war reconfiguration of the region, of the new setting, of the bilateral relations, etc., the Azerbaijani side would usually prefer the bilateral interaction, either with Georgia or with Armenia, and especially with Armenia. Now we have several tracks, such as the peace process, border demarcation, connectivity, trade, and this is the state-driven processes, and even the societal reconciliation, the expert and think tank engagement as we see, the certain bilateral frameworks, they have been very, very productive and yielded really tangible and visible outcomes. At the same time, we all realize that the South Caucasus is not a remote island in a vast ocean. So we must certainly deal with neighboring countries, external powers, etc. In this case, and I'm now trying to convey to you the dominant viewpoint in Baku, that the Azerbaijani side would definitely welcome those engagements which would try to support the peace process, or are designed to somehow build the regional resilience and infrastructure. For instance, the US is part of the TREE project, and I know that Ms. Grono can speak about this more in detail. I know that there are talks about the EU's involvement in certain infrastructure projects across Armenia and Azerbaijan. And in this case, and my last note is that Baku would definitely welcome those external powers or institutions if they offer something beneficial for all three countries in South Caucasus without creating new fault lines across the region. Thank you.
Rusif, I just want to quickly ask you on your previous point that you had made regarding institutional and legal frameworks. Any quick inputs on that?
Well, as I just said, we have several tracks between Armenia and Azerbaijan: the peace process, border demarcation, trade, and connectivity.
Okay.
And each of them has a certain autonomous life cycle, and each of them is contributing to the further institutionalization.
You did. Now as we close this panel, I want to ask a final question. Connectivity projects are decadal in nature. They take many years to fructify. You are necessarily building for the next generation. What we are doing here is we are securing the world for our youth of today. The youth today are equally connected online. There is a digital exchange happening. There are digital connectivities which are important in the digital age, in the knowledge age. The people to people, the youth to youth conversations are equally important. The bridge that we are building has to be led by humans. So what could connectivity projects do to leverage the power, this young energy, the digital communities, to strengthen the more analog process of building roads? How can we bridge hearts as we build roads? And I think that's my final question, the power of youth and connectivity. Rusif, let me start with you, and let me come to the Vice President to have the final word, but let me start with you.
I'll try to be very, very quick. I represent a think tank, and I'm part of several Armenian and Azerbaijani expert meetings. And I firmly believe that the state-driven peace process is going more or less okay, but we are yet to face and somehow contribute to the societal reconciliation in the future. And hopefully, in that case, certain digital tools, online engagement of Armenians and Azerbaijanis would contribute to this process. Thank you.
Thank you. Minister?
Well, I would say that people-to-people contacts are very important. Would it be through digital or physical? But this is very important. But this cannot be just separate track or separate issue. This is part of the wider context. And wider context is that we need incentives for regional cooperation, and we need framework for regional cooperation, in which we will have different tracks, including the people-to-people contacts.
Magdalena?
2 points. One is a little bit more still infrastructural. So, of course, when we're talking about connectivity through the Caucasus...
Can you come closer to the mic?
Again, yeah. Sorry, I seem to not be friends with this
Sorry,
mic.
I'm being greedy.
Samitji, thank you. Connectivity, in our understanding, also has a digital dimension, yeah? So, of course, we're talking about multimodal connectivity, so indeed transit, energy, but also digital. And I want to, of course, highlight the very significant potential that particularly this region and certainly this country has in terms of its capacities and potential for further development of the digital sphere, and including then also, renewable energy that will feed it, etc. So I think that this is certainly to be highlighted as part of the kind of broader infrastructure of connectivity. Now, as you link it to indeed either peace building or perhaps societal reconciliation and the role of youth, obviously the role of youth will be absolutely paramount. This is certainly a sociological group that I think is to be particularly worked with, both because of the future that you highlight, but also because they have a very particular snapshot of the past. Yeah, perhaps they have not had experiences of living together. Their views have been shaped differently, etc. So I think that a lot of the projects that have been mentioned, and that I know a lot of people in the audience are also working on, are specifically also targeting at creating opportunities for young people. And I think there's a plethora of cooperation opportunities that exist through education, through dialogue, through media, and yes, indeed also through online platforms.
Thank you. Ambassador Kılıç?
Well, I agree with Magdalena on a number of points that she has made. Well, there is a digital dimension and there is a humanitarian dimension as well. I mean, we should teach the young generation especially how they will utilize and what for they will use the opportunities or facilities provided by the connectivity. Digital part in that regard is of utmost importance. They should know how to use it, and they should use it in order to contribute to their own lives and to the society, for the development of the society as well. In that sense, of course, I believe at least that the share of the burden goes to the governments. I mean, yes, you are right, we are not working for today, we are working for the future, but after all, leadership is seeing the future. So they should see the future and they should create the necessary conditions for the youth, how they are going to utilize the positive outcome of the connectivity and how they can use it in order to make their lives better and in order to contribute to the livelihood of the societies they are in.
Thank you, Ambassador. Vice President, the final word to you.
Thank you. If I understand the question correctly, which is how can youth be involved, or how can youth learn about connectivity using digital means, I think it's quite banal. First, we need to start working on the ground to create these connectivity projects. Simultaneously, we have to run them, and the youth will find ways to digitalize information about this connectivity. You know, I'm not a big believer in people-to-people contacts in a vacuum. I think real steps on the ground are necessary on which people-to-people contacts need to be built. For example, I can bring my example as a person who was relatively recently. Whenever I pictured the Armenian-Azerbaijani connectivity, I always, in my head, I had this picture of a railway station in the Armenian town of Meghri in the Syunik region, which lays there in ruins without tracks. Whenever I thought about the Armenia-Turkey border, I pictured this closed fence, Turkey written on it in Russian from Soviet times, because this fence hasn't changed. The Iron Curtain has fallen, this part of the curtain hasn't fallen. But now I have to admit, whenever I am thinking about the Armenia-Azerbaijani connectivity, now a different picture comes to my mind, and that's the train coming from Azerbaijan, passing through Georgia, and bringing wheat to Armenia. Whenever I'm thinking about Armenia-Turkey border, I'm picturing Serdar Bey. Hoping to see Serdar Bey on a train and to meet him on the train, and maybe to post it on social media and to make the youth believe in the positive outcome of this process. Thank you.
No, I think that's a fantastic note to end this on. Ambassador Kılıç on a train with a smartphone connected on a Armenian telecommunication system. sending messages to the rest of the South Caucasus. I think that's connectivity we seek. But I think when we started this forum 3 years ago, the first conversation we hosted, and the Prime Minister of Armenia spoke, he outlined his vision for connectivity. He outlined his vision for a region that would enable its people to benefit from investing in each other, co-creating the future. And I'm delighted that we now have the trip, which is in many ways a part of that effort that started some years ago. And we have a European commitment to strengthen this particular process, with, of course, Turkey and EU signed on to this initiative. I'm sure we are heading towards good times. We are certainly riding the storm. Please join me in applauding this wonderful panel for their interventions this afternoon. Thank you very much, sirs and ladies.